Next.
Sorry.
My name is Meg Pinto. I live in the Alameda at 255 West 84th. I'm a member of our board, and I have to say I am the only board member who is in fact in favor of the designation. But one of the reasons I am is because when we faced major local law 11 repairs, what was clear was that our building was in worse shape because balconettes had simply been ripped off without adequate preparation behind the surface of the facade, etc. It cost us a fortune to repair the damages that came from wanton destruction at an earlier time. That's my terminology. I'm not speaking for the board at large. And what I think I want to say, two things. It's very important, in fact, to discourage people from the kind of destruction that my building, in fact, experienced in the last, say, 30 years, but also to say how crucial it is to help buildings pay for these repairs, because to do it right is phenomenally expensive. So I hope that, in fact, people will always keep in mind the cost. I absolutely think it's worth doing, and I'm very eager to have the district go through. But I also have to speak for individual co-op shareholders who are faced with enormous bills when they do have to make repairs, and anything the city or the state can do is enormously welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. And then Ellen Mulder's on, something like that. I can't quite read it, I'm sorry, but please proceed. Jesse Heck.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm submitting a memorandum which I will try to briefly summarize. To begin with, my name is Jesse A. Hecht, and I'm here representing 355 West 85th Street Corp, the owner of 355 West 85th Street. Isidore Silverman, owner of 309, 339, 345, 349, and 350 West 85th Street. And Carl Weistuck and 495 West End LLC, the owners of 495 West End Avenue. The owners I'm speaking for strongly object to the proposed extension. To begin with, and we're going to length in the memorandum, but there is no legal basis for it under the administrative code. At least none has been shown. It doesn't meet, I won't take your time now, but it does not meet the factors set forth in 25-302H of the administrative code. The special character, special historical, aesthetic, interest, value, the distinct section, and so on. All that's been presented so far is a commission-issued description which contains lists of architects, lists of styles, neo-Rec, Man, Romanesque, etc., descriptions like exuberant use of material and so on. However, in this description is no reference, either in terms of the, even in terms of the architect or the style, to any particular apartment buildings, whether any of these unidentified buildings still even exist at this day, whether they've been changed, whether they are among those that have already been individually landmarked. In fact, the conclusion of the description simply says that the district proposed extension reflects the history of development in the Upper West Side during the late 19th and early 20th centuries and through to the present day. That's a statement that can be made virtually about any neighborhood in the city. Any neighborhood will represent to some extent or another the history of its development through the present day. Now, the arbitrary nature of this proposed extension is further highlighted by the fact that, as some earlier speakers mentioned, there is the existing Riverside West End Historic District, which was designated in 1989. Now, in so designating that historic district, the Commission had to have found under the statute that it constituted a distinct section of the city by reason of its special character or special historic or aesthetic interest or value. As found by the Commission in designating the original area The proposed extensions were not seen to be part of that distinct section of the city. Now, the owners I represent are aware that under the Administrative Code, the Commission, in order to effectuate the purposes of the code, may designate changes in the locations and boundaries of the designated historic district. But this is not obviously simply an adjustment to boundaries or minor extension. I mean, the additions are many times what the original district, many times the area of the original district. Now, no facts or reasons are given as to why these large new tracts and hundreds of additional buildings should now be included in what was purportedly a distinct section of the city. Again, I won't take further time on the legal end, it's all in our memorandum. However, apart from purely legal considerations, there's no justification for imposing the burdens of landmark designation upon the hundreds of owners who would be forced into this expanded district. Most of these buildings, again, as has been mentioned earlier, are not architecturally or historically distinguished. Again, in the Commission's description, it doesn't cite particular apartment buildings as being distinguished, particularly on the side streets. However, if in fact the area covered by the proposed extension has preserved a special character or historic or aesthetic interest or value since the 1880s, it has done so without coming under the rule of the Commission. It has done so because of the efforts of the building owners who have devoted themselves to maintaining, operating, and preserving their properties, and have done so without being subject to the onerous, arbitrary processes of the Commission. Now, anyone who is personally familiar with the West Side, or even superficially with its development and history, I think it would be struck by one significant omission from the Commission's history of its development is contained in the description, and many of the histories of its development we've heard today. And that's the fact of the sharp decline in the area which took place in the 1960s and 1970s in both the physical condition and the maintenance of many buildings, as well as the quality of life. And when I speak of the physical condition and maintenance, I think it particularly on many side streets such as West 85th Street, even some of the buildings on West End Avenue. There's so many of the neighborhood's buildings have been brought back to the character which they now do possess. It is due in large part to their owners. Among those who acquired these buildings, including smaller apartment buildings in the 1960s and 70s, were immigrants who came here after World War II, who took the risk of investing whatever savings they had in acquiring dilapidated properties in a neighborhood few would then invest in, who renovated properties, frequently themselves, and provided housing at rent-regulated rents, and whose families now carry on the daily operation and maintenance of these buildings. That is certainly the case for the owners for whom I'm speaking today. The neighborhood has a character it does, not through any government commissions or self-appointed groups who have not participated in and do not know the effort and investment necessary to maintain these buildings, to provide housing at rent-regulated rents, but who simply wish to regulate and govern those who do. Since therefore it is the owners who have maintained the character of the neighborhood to what it is, there's no reason to believe that the character of the neighborhood will not continue to be preserved. On the other hand, there's every reason to believe that the owners will continue to operate their buildings as they have to date, without the dead hand of commission regulation being imposed on hundreds more buildings in the area. In fact, nothing has now changed or happened which would justify subjecting hundreds more of these buildings to such regulation. Now, as I go into detail in the memorandum, this is not...
I want to remind you of the 3 minutes, which are way over by now. If you could sum up, that would be great. Thank you very much.
I will sum up.
Sure.
I will just say that in my memorandum, this is not an abstract concern, theoretical concern. We give you actual examples of a building within the extension that was individually designated, and what the owner there had to go through and being not able to protect the building, as well as a building that is in the current historic district. And what the owner there, a year-long process to put some coating on the front of the building. And most significantly, and I'll just conclude with this, many of you might not realize that commission regulation covers even sidewalk repairs. And we cite the example there of the owner, without a city violation, noticed a sidewalk hazard. And it took 2.5 months to get the commission's permit to repair a sidewalk. And that's the reality. It's fine to talk about aesthetic theory, but these are the realities. So just my final conclusion is...
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Ellen?
Meltzer's on.
Yeah, there you go. Good. Couldn't quite read it, sorry.
No, it's my
And then
handwriting, I
Michael
apologize.
Canigliaro next. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you. Ellen Meltzer's on. Good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm here today on behalf of 254 West 82nd Street Owners Corporation, and we're writing in opposition, and we're here in opposition to the exclusion of 2281 Broadway from the Riverside West End Extension Historic District Extension. 2281 is a two-story building on the west side of Broadway between West 82nd and West 83rd Streets, which currently houses Barnes & Noble booksellers, Talbots, and Harry Shoes. As residents of 250-254, we're located on the southwest corner of West 82nd Street, just across from 2281 Broadway, and we appreciate on a daily basis the original and distinctive architectural features of its decorative facade. Our lobby contains several photographs which I've submitted to the commissioners. One dated in 1900 shows 2281 Broadway looking much as it does today. An elegant classic building with large windows screened by awnings on the second floor, handsome rows of balustrades beneath each window, and an unusual and ornamental elements. The simple cornice is the same one shown in the 1900 photograph. Built as a commercial building to serve nearby residences, it has had an interesting history. As you may be aware, 250 West 82nd Street was the first building designed in 1899 by noted architect Emery Roth. In combination with 2281 Broadway, the west side of 82nd Street and Broadway represents a historic corner of New York at the very end of the 19th century, as new construction was soon to replace older structures altogether. We believe that 2281 should be included in the Riverside West End Historic District Extension. While the original district referenced residential buildings only, the extension to Broadway, always a commercial street, should include this dignified building as an example of the mixed residential commercial character of Broadway. Unlike many of the two-story taxpayer buildings dating back to the 1920s and 30s, of no particular architectural distinction, 2281 Broadway is a distinguished example of a late 19th century retail establishment that exhibits an architectural quality that merits landmark recognition. Please consider protecting the charm and uniqueness of this corner of New York, and many thanks for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. And Michael Canigliaro here. And Batya. Yes,
Canigliaro.
next. Thank you.
I'm Michael Canigliaro.
Yes.
I'm a new resident of the West Side, and I have walked this entire area that we're talking about, as well as the down southern part, and I want to pass on more comments on it at this point. So we'll go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Batya. And then Herbert Levy will be next. If he wishes to speak, I'm not sure, but if he does, he's next. Thank you.
I'll make this very brief
Sure.
because the staff of the Landmarks Preservation Commission has written such an outstanding report. Landmarking this historic extension is really a win-win situation, not for just West Siders, but for really all of New Yorkers. I represent the Coalition for a Livable West Side, a West Side community-based organization created in 1981. I also represent myself. I have lived in the area for almost actually, I'm going to be 80, for almost 80 years. I grew up on 80th Street, and I moved to West 86th Street in 1965. I've seen so many changes to my neighborhood that I sometimes want to weep at the loss of our mom and pop stores, the loss of our vibrant, diverse economic and ethnic community. The coalition asks that you approve the West End Avenue Historic District's extension of 1, as is with no carve-outs. I have to tell you aside, the building at the corner of Broadway and West 80th Street should be included, because during World War II, it was the only cat house on the west side.
Herbert Levy. And Susan Nicholson next.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. I think the last time I was involved in a municipal public hearing, when it goes back to 1960, when I and a group of residents in the area opposed the city plan to designate the area where 84th Street, West 84th Street, is part of the West Side, the Riverside Amsterdam urban renewal project that was never realized, luckily. I live at 340 West 84th Street, and I am here for myself, my wife, and a number of the other owner-occupants of row houses on the 300 block of West 84th Street. We have previously submitted to you petitions signed by a number of people urging this agency to follow through and designate, and I speak only to the 300 block, although we obviously are interested in the whole area, urging you to designate especially the 300 block of West 84th Street as a historic district. It has 36 row houses on it, which represent, as far as we are concerned, a treasure of late 19th century private housing building in the city. We also submitted a block history for your review, and hopefully you all have read it. Parenthetically, I will say that it is unfortunate that the city, beginning in the late 1930s, destroyed the evidence of the 18th century city in the Corlears Brook area of the Lower East Side. So therefore, we do not have any real evidence of 18th century New York left. Hopefully, your efforts will preserve the evidence of the late 19th century on the Upper West Side. We believe that it is an area worth preserving. Sarah Jeremiah, who was a professor of fine arts, active mid-century, mid-20th century, first at Brooklyn College and later at Yale University, observed that row housing is the finest kind of residential housing that has ever been developed by society, beginning with the Roman Empire, ancient Rome. And it is true, in an era that did not have the benefit of air conditioning, it allows for cross-ventilation. It is also a period that still preserved and valued individual craftsmanship. So these buildings, however much they are changed, still preserve evidence of that kind of housing. Personally, we came to the area because we wanted to live in row housing. Secondly,
We got to sum up because I think we're over 3 minutes and there are a lot of people left. If you could, please.
well, all right. I think I have made the point that we appreciate your efforts in designating the area as a historic district, and we hope that you will persevere and follow through with the final designation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Susan Nicholson. And then Louis Cholden Brown. Or, yes. Yes,
Good
ma'am.
afternoon, and thank you, committee members. I'm Susan Nicholson. I'm also a resident of West 84th Street on the same block as Mr. Levy. We have a fairly intact block of brownstones, the north side being fully intact. Most homeowners and residents that we've spoken with are in support of the inclusion in the district. Since Mr. Levy already talked about the block, I would just say that I've lived on the west side for 30 years now. Previously, I lived on West 90th Street between West End and Riverside, and we did renovate brownstone. It was a co-op brownstone. And it was not extremely time-consuming or expensive. We did not find it more expensive to replace windows and redo the facade. We received materials from the Landmarks Committee, and we were able to complete the renovation in a timely fashion using quality materials and very fine workmanship, which we all consider to be a good investment in our building. And I hope that other people consider that in the future if they are landmarked. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Louis Cholden Brown. Then Mark Diller. Mark Diller here. And Francoise Bollack, if she is here, will be next. Please.
Good afternoon, and thank you. My name is Mark Diller. I'm a member of Community Board 7 and a member of its Preservation Committee. And I would yield my time to my colleague, Gabby Palitz, who has our resolution, and I would commend to you the resolution and the fine work that's been done.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I am Gabrielle Palitz. I'm co-chair of the Preservation Committee of Community Board 7, and I'm first here to ask the Commission to take notice of the full text of the CB7 resolution supporting the designation of the West End Avenue Historic District, which our board approved unanimously 35-0 in October of 2010. This was previously submitted to the Commission and is available to the on the CB7 website. If you need it, we can send you another copy. I'm also here to read the testimony of my co-chair of the Preservation Committee, Lenore Norman, who couldn't be here this afternoon. She writes, I am Lenore Norman, co-chair of the Preservation Committee of Community Board 7, Manhattan. I'm also speaking for myself as a longtime resident of the Upper West Side. I want to applaud the Landmark Preservation Commission for taking the original request to designate the West End Avenue corridor and expanding that to include the side streets reaching to the west side of Broadway in many cases. I also want to commend the West End Preservation Society for their vision and tenacity in proposing the district and seeing it through to this day, the first of 3 public hearings. Kudos also to our public officials who so readily offer their support in this endeavor. Many words have been written and spoken about the significance of the area under review, and I'm just reiterating a few of them. West End Avenue presents a unique blend of urban neighborhood domestic architecture consisting almost entirely of classic apartment buildings dating from the turn of the 20th century to shortly prior to World War II, interspersed with pockets of largely intact individual row houses and a few notable institutional buildings. The side streets, for the most part, continue the pattern of row houses, many of which are being converted back to one-family homes, reinforcing the unique sense of place. The majority of these buildings along the avenue and down the streets are unprotected, giving rise to opportunities for out-of-scale and out-of-character development and inappropriate alterations. Some demolition of row houses has already taken place on West End Avenue, and there has been much concern with the fate of the 4 row houses designed by C.H. Gilbert on West 86th Street. Designation of this area and the others proposed for public hearing not only protects their architecture, but continues our city's heritage and not insignificantly increases property values to and around the designated area. For these reasons, Community Board 7 Manhattan enthusiastically supports this proposed designation and urges the Commission to act as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. Francoise Bollack and Dee Ryder will be next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Francoise Bollack. I'm an architect in New York City. I teach historic preservation in the preservation program at Columbia University. And I'm a resident of the Upper West Side. And I'm testifying today for myself as an architect in New York City and a resident. First of all, the first point I want to make, you've heard a lot about today, and that is a tremendous sense of place of this area, which is given to it by its consistent fabric of tall buildings interspersed with individual row houses. Also want to put in a word for the Broadway fashion building, which has been a long time favorite of mine. But the main point I want to make today is I want to debunk this notion that it is more expensive to do work on a historic building that is overseen by the Landmarks Preservation Commission than it is to do work on a non-designated building. And the only way you can say that this is more costly is if you only consider the first cost in the project, as Meg Pinto and Susan Nicholson have testified before, particularly Meg Pinto, when she described work that had been done on her building, with it badly considered, which at the end of the day cost the building more money. What my experience is as an architect in New York City working on many of those buildings is that when a building is designated, it injects into the project an amount of careful consideration that accrues to the value of the work in the long term. In other words, the commission reviews it or the staff reviews it, which slows down the process a bit, protects the owners from themselves often in wanting to make hasty decisions, and gives the architect, whose sole interest is in the longevity of the building, the arguments necessary to encourage the owner to make the right decision. So the only way in which one can say that it is more expensive to own a landmark building than a non-landmark building if one only considers the first cost, which is a very short-sighted view of architecture and the maintenance of our heritage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dee Ryder, she here? And then Mosette Broderick. Okay. And then Andrew. Yeah, and then Andrea Goldwyn after Mosette.
Okay. Commodore Vanderbilt and Green created the West Side. It was impossible to build on the East Side. Therefore, real estate pressure moved to the West Side, forcing out the market gardens filled with squatters who sat on farms, supported themselves selling their goods downtown, and under the rocks of the West Side in those days, tough young kids, new immigrants from Europe, hid when they were escaping the cops. This is an area that is today a residential encyclopedia of domestic dwellings from the 1880s to World War II, when rent control and ethnicity preserved the area as it was into the 1980s. In the late 19th century, the country houses sporadically built along the grounds left, and the West Side Improvement Company came in and built 600 houses as the few older country houses fell to the wrecker's ball. At this time, the multiple dwelling units were forbidden by the city's daily law. So there was nothing to do but real row houses. Some 600 row houses were built on the land of the Upper West Side in the areas we're speaking of today, and a little beyond it. They didn't sell them. When the daily law was removed, apartment buildings rapidly made inroads into that area, making the Upper West Side the place where the battle of what type of multiple dwelling unit would come into the city take place. The story of multiple dwelling units in America, the French flats, tenements, all of that, was fought in this district. The apartment house won. This district acts as an encyclopedia of apartment houses with a clean cornice line on West End Avenue until the demolition of All Angels some 20, 30 years ago. To show the importance of this area as where the people lived, the first subway line went up Broadway, not on the East Side. Followed rather quickly by churches who came to abide next door to the houses, which was followed by commercial buildings, which come right after the churches, into residential areas. And I would say that if the two residential streets that have no commerce on them, West End and Park Avenue, are the major examples in New York City. West End is the earlier one, the far more interesting one, and the one with diversity in street walls, unlike some of the things we've heard today. The only other thing I'd like to say is I'd like to make a commercial for the 3 buildings on Broadway that were left out. Zabar's, that's a great 1950s. The fashion building and the Barnes and Noble's building, and I agree with, I didn't know it was a cat house.
Yes, it was.
It's certainly a vintage building. There's so much here we don't know about. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to learn a lot more about the way development took place 100 years ago.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Andrew Goldman, and then Gabriella Collins.